According to the London-based Foundation for Jewish Heritage, there were some 17,000 synagogues in Europe before the Shoah. Today, only around 3,400 are known to survive, with fewer than 800 used today as synagogues. Some synagogues in the former Soviet Union were nationalized by Soviet authorities and converted for other use well before World War II. But, beginning with the so-called Kristallnacht in November 1938, the Nazis made the desecration and/or destruction of synagogues part and parcel of their campaign against Europe's Jewish population. The demolition or otherwise erasure of synagogues continued after the end of World War II. Post-war communist policy in particular generally suppressed Jewish practice and culture, as well as honest discussion or recognition of Jewish history. And this approach was extended to synagogues and other Jewish built heritage. In what is today the Czech Republic, for example, more synagogues were demolished during communist rule than during World War II. After the war, in the near total absence of Jews, the majority of surviving synagogue buildings in Central and Eastern Europe were either left standing abandoned or in ruins, or transformed to serve other uses that often canceled or denigrated the identity of the building. For example, as sports halls, fire stations, churches, warehouses, shops, restaurants, residential properties, and much more. Destruction, abandonment, neglect, or transformation of synagogue buildings also took place in Western Europe. In France, particularly in the Alsace region, a number of synagogues were left abandoned in poor condition or transformed for other use after World War II. And in Italy, the interior fittings of various synagogues no longer in use were transferred to Israel, leaving the buildings empty or used for other purposes. The most notable example is the synagogue of Conigliano, a small town north of Venice, which had not been used for a religious service since 1918. Its interior was transferred to Israel and now forms the core of the Museum of Italian Jewish Art in Jerusalem. After the fall of communism in Eastern and Central Europe, the recovery and rediscovery of Jewish heritage sites and memory became a component of the efforts to build new democracies and civil society. This process included efforts to restore ruined, abandoned, or transformed synagogue buildings in ways that reclaimed their identity and paid tribute to their history, even if these buildings were not used again as synagogues. A conference held in Bratislava, Slovakia, in 2009, issued a series of recommendations for best practices in the care and management of Jewish-built heritage. The conference was attended by representatives of Jewish communities and organizations and heritage experts from a dozen European countries, Israel and the United States. Synagogues and former synagogues should retain a Jewish identity and/or use whenever possible, though each one does not necessarily need to be restored or fully renovated, they said. And former synagogues, no matter what their present ownership of use, should be sensitively marked to identify their past history. Unfortunately, most of the cases of adaptive reuse of synagogue buildings in Europe, that is, their transformation from a place of Jewish religious worship to that of another function, have lacked this sensitivity. The Historic Synagogues in Europe database provides a long list of present uses of former synagogue buildings, including, among many others, garages, bakeries, banks, cinemas, dwellings, fire stations, factories, hospitals, police stations, warehouses, and sports facilities. Only some of these places openly acknowledge the original identity of the building, and many are listed as ruins. That's not the whole story, though. Over the past 3 decades and more, many once abandoned synagogues have also undergone sensitive restoration, brought back from ruinous conditions in ways that recognize, even honor, their original function, and in some cases explicitly commemorate a destroyed Jewish community, even though they are not used as synagogues. In ways that now demonstrate both commemoration and revitalization, They now serve as Jewish and general cultural centers, libraries, museums, arts and educational centers, and even memorial sites. Quite a few are listed as historic monuments, and some, of course, have, happily, returned to use as Jewish houses of worship.